Mulkey in our life sciences group. She is going to engage in our first panel discussion, the patient view. You'll see that our agenda today is focused on a host of views. We want to understand the different perspectives that we're all looking at this same issue with. And we're going to start with the most important view, the patient view. So Elizabeth, I'll let you take it away.
Here we go. Okay, so excited to introduce our first panel here. We have Jaime McHugh and David Downing who are going to come up and join me. If you guys want to come up, give them a round of applause. Walk up song here. So as they're getting settled, I really can't think of a better way to kick off today's discussion than by really centering the experience of the families who are dealing with rare diseases every day. So just a brief introduction of my wonderful panelists here. So we have Jaime McHugh. Jamie's a mom, full-time caregiver to her identical twin adult daughters who have CHD2. We'll hear more about that from Jaime. Jamie's family is actually here with us today. Her daughters, Jessica and Juliana, their dad, John, and their grandmother, and Jamie's mom, Linda. So welcome, and thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us. And we also have David Downing. David is a caregiver dad to a 26-year-old daughter, Madison, who has GRN1 disorder. And I'm really excited I've chatted with them before this panel, and so I know they have a lot of really great insights to share. So the first topic that I want to talk to you guys about, and I think this is probably something that rings true for a lot of people in this room, since we're all kind of here to talk about the rare disease space. For a lot of patients and families, actually getting a diagnosis can be such a journey and takes such a long time. And you both talked about this experience of seeing multiple specialists, not having a name for what was going on. And that was, really difficult and isolating for you and for your families. So David, I actually want to start with you because you have, sort of the kind of a unique story here. Madison had been seen by a team at Boston Children's for a long time, but she was just diagnosed recently. And so can you tell us a little bit about that journey of getting to a diagnosis and what it meant for your family?
Yeah, again, it was, so it's interesting. So my wife and I we moved to Massachusetts in '94, and we used to work right downtown here. My wife worked at Filene's and I used to work in Kendall Square. And we had our first daughter, Madison, in 1998. And at 3 months, she had a seizure. And we took her to the developmental medicine program at Boston Children's and went through what was the process in 1998. And she had a seizure. It never happened again. Or it didn't happen for another like 12 years. And at age 12 or 13, she had another set of seizures. We put her on a med. It resolved the situation. So now we're up to like maybe 2014, 2015. And, we really never thought, this was, I think we assumed this was a genetic disorder. We were kind of told this was maybe genetic, but it was really nothing we could do. There was no, and so we sort of backburned it because you're really managing this child with a very serious developmental disability and everything that goes along with that. And we were, dealing with G-tubes and, eye surgeries and all these other, issues related to her. And in at one point we were actually, I talked to my wife about this last night, we were actually asked if we wanted to get a genetic test. And it was, I think it was phrased to my wife as, we could test for other things, but it really wouldn't change anything. And so we didn't do a test. And this was only recently, like in the last 5 years. And we then, during the pandemic, we changed neurologists, and the new neurologist, a young, smart neurologist, showed up and said, Maddie has been on this seizure med for 10 years. She's never had a seizure. We should, if we want to take her off, we should look at maybe taking her off of it and but before we did that, we should do a genetic test. And my wife and I said, you're never going to find anything. And we did a genetic test, and it turned positive for GRIN1. Sorry, I didn't intend to get emotional. And it was nuts. Sorry. So we literally hung up the phone, and they said, well, you know, there's this group that's doing patient advocacy called Cure Grin. And we hung up the phone, and I picked up the phone, and I called somebody in Colorado, another parent, and she said, oh, yeah, well, we're doing all this stuff, and, you know, there's all these parents, and we, you know what this is, and there's all this research going on, and it was like head spinning. We went from just being a family that was treating a symptom to, like, there was this, like, amazing community of researchers who was working on this and literally was doing, you know, gene replacement therapy studies, and it was literally unbelievable. And then, you know, fast forward sort of 6 months later, we sat in a conference room at the Royal Sonesta Hotel in Cambridge with 75 NMDA research people and a bunch of parents, probably 30 parents. And we talked about curing our kids. And it was surreal. And I think, you know, I was joking, I think, with Elizabeth that, you know, I used to laugh, like, you know, I used to think, oh, you know, wouldn't it be nice to be invited to the rare disease event? Because, you know, like, we were never even in this club. We were, you know, we were this family pushing the kid in the stroller without a diagnosis. It was crazy.
No,
it's crazy.
No, thank you so much.
No, it's nuts.
Yeah. Well,
so we're literally now thinking about, you know, we have a child that in her lifetime there could be a cure.
Yeah. I mean, so in talking to you, you know, David, it was, I mean, I so appreciate hearing your story, and I think everyone does, because it is hearing those stories of what a shift in perspective it was to actually, you know, be understood and be seen by other parents and other families. And Jaime, you know, you talked about, thank you. You talked about, you know, sort of a similar kind of odyssey story. Can you tell us a little bit about just how sort of that journey for your twin daughters?
I can, thanks. I'm hopeful I don't get like you, but it does tend to happen. So my daughters, my story is very familiar to yours. Yeah. The girls were recently diagnosed within the last few years with CHD2, which is their genetic mutation causes seizures. But my daughters had a very normal childhood. They were the norm, the social norm. They had typical. They hit their milestones. As they aged, they had a few quirks, but the school district they weren't concerned. And elementary school, we hit a wall. Juliana was 14 when her symptoms literally hit us overnight. She started basically having psychosis, walked by her bedroom, and she was having full-blown conversations with herself. I mean, it hit like instant. It was scary. I was horrified, but then it went away. I called the pediatrician, and they said, you know, sometimes kids just do these things. But then it started to progress to the point that I had to have my daughter hospitalized in 5 different pediatric inpatient settings for psychosis, and they diagnosed her with schizophrenia in the beginning. I just, you know, I worked in the field. I said, how can this be? This doesn't make any sense. Finally, we found a neurologist that had done an MRI and found a fist-sized solitary fibrous tumor in her head and neck. that had dislocated her carotid. They said that was an incidental finding, yet from there, her seizures just became uncontrollable. She would just pass out. She'd have up to 20 seizures a day. I mean, this is a normal child, and it was heartbreaking. It wasn't just seizures, though. I mean, her body, she'd have dystonic events. So I always say dystonia is almost like, to me, it's like rigor mortis. Your muscles cramp and they lock and they twist, and her body twists, and she gets facial droop. She can't speak, and she's locked in position for hours, and she just screams uncontrollably in pain. And we called 911 more times than I can even imagine. And we'd go to the hospital left and right. I mean, so many times, and basically dismiss that there's nothing that they can do. They don't know what to do. I can't even begin to tell you how many times, or how many times we were just dismissed because they didn't understand it. And when they actually saw it, and the doctor would witness an event that she would have, I mean, the look on their faces was just like, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. Anyway, she had the tumor removed, major surgery between Dana-Farber and Boston Children's. And then the cycle had continued. The psychosis actually cleared up after this, and but she just continued to pass out, have the seizures, have dystonia, and then right after all this, then her muscles started to weaken. She has low muscle tone. Her at one point they had said, oh, it's all functional. It's a functional neurological disorder. We went to the Mass General clinic there. And then they said, something doesn't seem right. We're going to put other that. We don't know exactly what's happening here because she's having contractions now. Her toes curled under. And then her legs started to buckle. She couldn't walk. She ended up in a wheelchair. She had to have nerve block procedures and was casted from the waist down, had to learn to walk again. And since that time, her muscles have never been the same. They weakened. She has to walk with AFO's leg braces. And the seizures have been a little better, not 100%, but a little better. But we always get dismissed. I mean, 1,000 times a day. Just you call a doctor and they're like, oh, her case is too complex, we can't take you. Or we see her neurologist now who says, well, after we got her diagnostics from her genetic screening, well, I don't actually believe in genetics. I mean, I've heard this from so many providers, I can't even begin to tell you. It's very unfortunate, but I was at a loss. It had been over a year and my daughter was in pain, and we were just having to learn to deal with these horrible, horrible phases she would go through. And she was in school at the time, and the school couldn't handle her. I had to fight with the school district. Then I had to fight my own town to get a wheelchair ramp installed because I had to request a variance from the town. And the fights and the money spent for getting misdiagnosed is just, I mean, horrible. But I found NORD online, the National Organization for Rare Disorders. Actually, it boosted our morale. It was really helpful to find them because they're the ones actually that suggested genetic testing when no one else had mentioned that to us. And it took a while to get through that process. And then they found the CHD2, and at the beginning, they had to send it back out for episignature and find out that it was a positive diagnosis. And there's actually 2 other genetic things that they're looking at right now, genetic mutations. But we're in the process of dealing with the symptoms. As the doctor said, well, it doesn't matter what it is. We just need to, as you said, it doesn't matter what it is, we just need to treat the symptoms. Well, yes, it does matter to us as parents and as to the rare disease person, because if there's something that we can do to make this better and to help others and help my own daughter, yeah, well, no, we want to know what it is. So the genetic testing is still in process. Our geneticist, who we loved, actually ended up leaving children, so that's unfortunate, but we're going to work on the other 2 genes, because actually last night, I almost couldn't come today because Jules is having an issue where she can't digest any proteins, and she can't swallow. She's waiting on an endoscopy. It's been 3 weeks trying to get in just to have this done. She's losing weight. She's in pain. It's just, it's countless hospitalizations and ER visits and all these things that it's just, if we had a care, we'd save lots of money. I mean, I think about my family and how many millions of dollars that we spent in healthcare, for an unfortunate, reason. If we had answers, we'd save a lot of money, and then we'd save the pain and suffering from all that they go through. So,
Yeah.
Sorry,
No.
going off.
No. So I think this
It's a
is,
lot.
so I think this actually kind of transitions perfectly to another thing that I wanted to talk to both of you about. This idea that you're sort of dismissed and told, well, it's not going to change anything. And, a lot of the folks in the room here today, are working on clinical trials and developing candidates, get them into the clinic and maybe advance towards approval to try to change something. So, Jaime, you mentioned that your daughter's been involved in some clinical research. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like as the caregiver of someone who's participating in clinical trials and what it's been like for your family?
Well, I think we're part of quite a few different research studies with the combined brain, Rare X, of course. We had found the coalition to cure CHD2. CHD2 is another very ultra rare disorder that was, I think it was discovered, I believe, in 2013, and the coalition just began, I believe, in 2020. We were fortunate enough to attend their first event in person in Orlando a few years back, and we took part of the St. Jude research studies. But I think doing this, it empowers us. It gives us hope. And I always say to the girls, like, hope is our biggest, factor right now. I always say, hold on, pain ends. That's what hope stands for us. We're hopeful that all this research and the studies that everyone here is working towards will lead to cures and help the rare disease community, because right now we're kind of at a standstill. It's been very difficult to say, but having the research studies, I think we're hopeful that a cure will come, and
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, the reality that, we are hopeful, but, progress isn't always linear.
right.
And so, that it is important to kind of keep on learning and learning from what doesn't work and, advancing towards what hopefully does. And so, David, you mentioned that sort of with this diagnostic odyssey that Maddie and your family have been on, that she hasn't been able to actually participate in clinical trials. Can you tell us a little bit about what has changed in sort of the clinical space and sort of the information that families in the GRIN1 community have shared with each other, just since you all kind of became part of that community?
Yeah, no, I can. So I think we were chatting at the table about this. So I think a couple things. Number one is that because Maddie's 26, she was actually too old to participate in the one clinical trial that exists. And I think it, for her condition, GRIN1, this obviously there's, new parents are coming along and getting tested, and it's rare, but there's actually an adult population that exists, probably in institutions or, and it's being supported, that probably has GRIN1, has never really been tested and needs to be served. And so I think that it's important to advocate for older people to participate in these clinical trials as well. In addition, the clinical trial that she was, this med was targeted for, was really for one of the initial cohorts was for kids with seizures, and Madison fortunately does not have seizures. And so it was kind of, but potentially could benefit maybe another way, from behavior wise, because we deal with a lot of behavior issues that we treat with, some significant meds. So I think, it's important from an age standpoint whatnot. But I think, so the other thing, just from an organizational standpoint, is that I was literally on a call with CareGrin, our organization organized on Monday, with a neurologist from New York Presbyterian, another parent from a Fragile X group who had sort of been through the odyssey of clinical trials, and then a parent who's going through another clinical trial, really just to kind of educate our community about what is a clinical trial, what to expect, and what's it like, and what the level of effort is going to be involved. And so it was driven by our organization, plus this neurologist at New York Presbyterian who was treating GRIN kids. And I think that was really amazing for us, because I've never had a kid in a clinical trial. I have no idea what to expect. And so that education and knowledge sharing has really been beneficial, I think, from our group. And so that going forward, if we're offered a clinical trial for Maddie, we would have some expectation of what to know, what's going to happen with this. So, I mean, it seems pretty basic, but it's just education. Like, how does it work? How are we going to have to travel? Is there a stipend? And that's the kind of sort of nitty gritty detail that we were able to go into, that they went into with families. So I think that's super helpful, just educating us, because it's all, nobody signs up to have a kid with a rare disorder, and so it's all new, like wherever you went. And so it's important to share the information, I'd say.
Yeah, that is a really important message to hear, because, I think for people like me and people like probably others in the room, where this is kind of the other side, not always, the patient side or the caregiver side. We kind of speak this lingo, and there are all the acronyms that are sort of thrown around. And so remembering that, for almost all families, like, this is the first time thing, and this is step one on the journey. So I think it's really important to remember to keep that patient centricity as we're thinking about developing clinical trials and sort of getting the message out there. So I have one more question for each of you, kind of tying back to what it's meant to be part of the rare disease community. So, David, you kind of touched on this at the beginning, but, it sounds like even since the time that Maddie has been diagnosed, there's been, kind of a lot of progress. And so can you just sort of sum up for us, how has being a part of the GRIN1 community sort of changed your outlook as a parent and as an advocate?
So it's added this level of complexity. So number one, it's been amazing, because it's, as I said, we were initially treating symptoms, and now you're having to learn this language of researchers, and you're meeting people who know your kid and who have an interest in your kid and want to know. It's absolutely amazing. But I think it also, we came in, there was, when exome testing really, when the GRIN1 test really became available, probably in 2017, there was a nexus of scientists who kind of had done basically the basic science, who understood the basic science. So I think a lot of parents just started showing up and asking questions, right? And this was, a lot of these people were at the University of Toronto. And I think that for us, it's, we now have, I can pick up the phone and talk to somebody who did the mouse research on the specific mutation that Madison has. I mean, that's nuts. That's a crazy, I'm way more informed. And so now when I can go and talk to my epilepsy genetics doctor at Brigham and Women's, I can say, I know a lot. I'm going to know way more than he is. And Madison is going to get a level, hopefully she gets a level of service that she deserves, right? Because it's, that person is not going to know, there's 700 epilepsy, genes. There's no way that physician is going to know everything. So I have to really, I think as parents, we spend a lot of time educating your physician to provide you better service, which is, I guess, part of the game, but that's what we're going to do, right? But I think the other thing it's really made me realize is how important it is, for us for GRIN1, it's important to have things like ICD-10 and ICD-11 codes, so that when we show up in the hospital, people know what our child has. Our daughter was in UMass for some major surgery last year. And I had physicians, we probably dealt with 200 medical people in the state of Massachusetts last year with Madison. Absolutely incredible. And she doesn't show up. If you look at what her primary diagnosis is, it doesn't show up. So I spent a lot of time last year talking to physicians and talking to social workers and saying, Madison has Grin 1, and this is what this is, and you need to put this in the notes. And this is the state of Massachusetts where I'm doing this, what you would think, oh, we should be really good at this, but we're really not in a lot of ways. So I think it's some of the stuff I've learned. It's that there's a lot of work that can be done that's not research oriented to sort of grease the skids so that when these kids show up, when somebody with a rare disease shows up in a clinical situation, that they get a better level of awareness of what they have and what might be treated. Because as I said, we were saying at lunch, even if my daughter shows up with a neurological issue and she's going to go see a gastroenterologist, that person is going to see that she has Grin 1, and they might spend 2 minutes looking up her diagnosis online so that when I walk in the room, they're going to know what she has. And having that information, and that GI guy goes, or woman says, I know what that is. I had no awareness of this. And now I can look online and I can see how other kids are being treated. But unless it's in the record, they don't know and they might not look. And so there's a lot of that spade work. And the other thing that I would say that happened to us, I think is really important, is that until we met parents, we didn't really understand, other parents who had Grin 1, we really didn't understand the language that we had to speak to our clinicians, because we were not getting the meds that we needed until I walked in the room and I said, she needs X, or what do you think of X? That person didn't respond to me. But then now when I show up and I say, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? They go, oh, oh yeah, okay. And you just get a better sense of response. But that we really had to step up and take that responsibility to do the front end work. And that was the benefit of the patient advocacy groups, because we sat in a room, a bunch of parents, and we said, what are you doing for your kid? Or somebody said, well, my kid's done this. Oh, and I would write it down and I would turn around and call my neurologist and say, hey, can we try this for Madison? Well, that's not a bad idea. But if I hadn't done that, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So that seems like an easier problem to solve in many ways than is finding a cure.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't hear that. So I would maybe put that on the agenda someplace, because that's just basic spade work of physician to patient medical care.
Yeah. Yeah, I was struck talking to both of you just how intense of a job it is to be a full-time advocate for your kids. And so I want to kind of close out our panel here, Jamie, and hear from you about your experience getting involved with NORD, running for Rare, and kind of how NORD has helped facilitate that full-time job of being an advocate.
Well, I can talk on that. I mean, the interesting part is I had a career in advocacy. Prior to all this, I had a full-time job. I was a senior program director. I was overseeing doing quality assurance, licensing. I've worked in the field for years, advocating for other people until it hit overnight. So we had to, I had to give up my career to be a full-time caregiver to my identical twin girls, both with a rare disorder. And like I said, they were typical, neurotypical kids. And then Jules started her symptoms at 14, and then her identical twin sister had just got her license. She was 20, and then she had her first seizure, and after that seizure, she was paralyzed on her right side. Her right arm came back, her right leg never did, so she has hemiparesis. And she's actually next month having a spinal stimulator implant to hopefully help the pain she suffers from. So there's just so many things, and as a parent, you know, having to give up your job, I mean, it's a huge piece, but now my advocacy goes towards my kids, because I know I was in a really deep, dark place for a while. We all were. It doesn't only, rare disease does not only impact the person, it impacts everybody around them. Our family we were a mess. We didn't know who to turn to, where to go for answers, or who could help. There's no book. You don't go to a doctor and have them tell you what you need to do. You have to learn to be your own best advocate. So that's when I was in a dark place myself. I found NORD, reached out to them, and attended my first family forum in Cleveland, Ohio. And it was just so empowering as a caregiver to find that there are research studies going on. There's people out there actually advocating for a cure. And as a parent, you know, when you're in your deepest, darkest place, you know, it's not any good for your child, because they're looking at you as their role model, so you have to be strong for that person. So that's when Lord kind of helped me to pick myself back up. And it empowered me to say, you know what, girls, like, we're not going to dwell on this. Let's live our best life and do what we can, you know, for your own quality of life. You have to go on. You know, there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. But on the good days, let's make the best of them. So that's what we do. We get out there and we actually use the NORD events. And last year we went to LA and attended the family forum in Universal, and it was a blast. We had a great time. When I started with them, you know, it was just kind of learning about NORD and getting out there to talk to other families, which is empowering to meet other people going through what you go through, because you can't really talk to too many people about it. You become isolated. You lose friends, you lose family, you know, your career goes out the window. Everything focuses on the rare disease. NORD was just empowering for me and the girls. And I ended up becoming a community partner. The girls and I would follow runners that were running in the Running for Rare events. And we'd work with somebody that was running to kind of give them motivation as to why they're running, why they're out there sweating and bleeding and you know, in pain, and what it means to them. And they'd make a connection with the person running. So a lot of them were from gene therapy companies or whatnot. So they'd learn about what we go through as a family. And from there, as a community partner, I was talking to Philip, the one who came up with Running for Rare. And next thing you know, I ran my first Boston Marathon last year. In 2024, and I made it. And I think I didn't have enough training by any means. I was sore, and I barely made it through, but I made it through. I crossed the finish line, and earned that medal. And I just thought about the pain that my kids go through, and that I have to finish for them. So I did it for them. And we were on.
Yeah, it's applause worthy.
Thank you. But I'm running again this year. I can't believe it, but I am running again this year. And I have two of my, I play on a female hockey league as well. And two of my teammates are joining me for the run for NORD to raise awareness. And one of the news stories is coming out. They're coming to my home tomorrow to film. So that's exciting, just to raise awareness and spread, you know, how we can help the rare disease community. But so yes, I'm running again, and we're excited. I'm very excited.
Well, that is awesome. And I think we actually have information about Jamie's fundraising page that we can circulate or share to kind of help her in her effort. So.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and we are, you know, with NORD, there's such a big part of our lives and everyone else's lives, and I know, you know, corporate sponsorships and things make such a huge impact on everyone. So I mean, we really need to spread awareness for this. So I'm super thankful for everybody for everything you do for the rare disease community. We appreciate your efforts. So thank you.
Well, we want to thank both of you for taking time out of your day to be here. If everybody could just join me in giving a quick round of applause to our panelists. So thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Jamie. And I'm going to turn it back over to Matt.
Elizabeth, Jamie, David, thank you so much for sharing. I think you see many of us are wearing these Rare Disease Champion lapel pins. They're magnetic. I hope folks grab some outside. There's no bigger rare disease champion than a rare disease caregiver and patient advocate. And we have so much to learn from all of our folks in that space. And I love what Jamie and David said, community in rare disease. It's about building a community, building morale, building strength, and building hope. Hold on, pain ends. I love that. That's great. Our next panel, we're turning now to the researcher view, and our partner, Sarah Stoiber from here in the Boston office, is going to lead us through that discussion. If we could advance the slide, please.